Hello there, and welcome back to yet another Anime Villainous how-to video. It's me, Chaos in the Sky, and today I'll be showing you how to play as Queen Beryl from Sailor Moon in Anime Villainous. Queen Beryl is the leader of the Dark Kingdom, which has the goal of awakening their true ruler, Queen Metalia. To do this, however, they need to gather energy from humanity, as well as try to find the Silver Crystal, which is what Beryl sets out to do with the assistance of her mini minions. Naturally, this leads to Beryl and her underlings clashing with the Sailor Guardians. Even with the magical girl opposition, Beryl commands the Dark Kingdom to do whatever necessary to revive Metalia and plunge the world into darkness. Whether it be brainwashing innocents or sicking the monsters of her kingdom on her foes, Beryl is unrelenting in her goal, and will stop at nothing to achieve it. Queen Beryl seeks to amass human energy to awaken Metalia, which for Anime Villainous ends up being an objective to end her turn as Super Beryl, which is her only form card. Before we get into achieving Beryl's objective though, we're going to take a look at her territory, because she has a unique gimmick you'll have to understand to play as her. Queen Beryl's territory does not have your typical gain power actions. All 4 of her gain power actions are question marks instead of the usual gain 1, 2, or 3. Because of this, when playing as Beryl, you'll end up adding power to these locations, and however much power you end up adding is how much you can then gain. When you start a game as Queen Beryl, part of her setup is to add 1 power to each location, so you won't be without options for gaining power at the start. When you go to one of these locations and choose to gain power, you take all of the power at that location, bringing it down to 0. It isn't like a normal gain power action where the number remains the same after you take the action. Let's get a quick example, as that will make it more clear than just having it explained. We'll say that Beryl has managed to get 5 power at Juban School. When you go to Juban School and choose to gain the 5 power, the number goes down to 0, because you have taken away the power that you put there. You'll then have to use other cards to build the power back up to gain more from there again. Beryl has plenty of tools for adding power to locations, and it's a main focus of her gameplay. But before we start going over that, as well as Beryl's ability, let's go back to how to achieve her objective, which is to end her turn as Super Beryl. Of course, the first thing we'll look at is Super Beryl itself. This is the most expensive card in Anime Villainous thus far, with a ludicrous 30 power needed to play it. This means your main focus as Queen Beryl will be to add power to your locations, take that power, and eventually build up to the 30 power you need to play Super Beryl. Once you've played Super Beryl, however, your reward isn't just Showdown. You also get a base strength of 4, which can clash almost all the heroes Beryl may face with ease. On top of that, Super Beryl also makes it where the amount of power you must pay for card costs and abilities is reduced to 0. That basically means you get to play cards and use card abilities for free. After paying 30 power, you no longer have to worry about power ever again. However, there is one other hurdle to overcome to play Super Beryl, which is that it can only be played if Silver Crystal is in your territory. So let's take a look at Silver Crystal, since it's also necessary for Beryl's objective. Silver Crystal is an item that costs 10 power to play, but it has a way to reduce that cost in its ability. The cost to play Silver Crystal is reduced by 1 power for each ally in your territory, so you can make it less expensive by getting plenty of allies out. Beryl has 12 allies total, so it's possible that you could play Silver Crystal for completely free if you have enough of them around. Now, the Silver Crystal does have one other drawback, which is the rest of its ability. When you enter Showdown, you have to choose an opponent. That opponent will then find and play Sailor Moon, attaching the Silver Crystal to her. With the Silver Crystal attached, Sailor Moon gets +3 strength. We'll look at Sailor Moon herself later, but all you need to know for now is that this means Queen Beryl has a guaranteed Showdown phase, similar to Crocodile and Cell. She enters Showdown at the end of her turn with Super Beryl in play, and that is when Sailor Moon will be played by Silver Crystal, meaning you won't have an opportunity to defeat Sailor Moon until your following turn. Now that we've covered everything necessary for completing Beryl's objective, let's get into what cards will help you actually accomplish it. First, we're going to look at the 4 allies most pivotal to Queen Beryl's progress, her 4 kings. The kings are Beryl's most consistent way of adding power to her locations, which is the main reason they're so vital. All of them are 2 cost with 3 strength, and each of their abilities trigger at the very start of your turn before Queen Beryl moves. First, let's look at King Nephrite. Before moving, if there are no heroes at King Nephrite's location, you may add 2 power to his location. The kings adding power to a location is always contingent on there being no heroes present at the location where you're adding the power. King Nephrite is the most straightforward of the kings as well, just adding 2 power to his own location. King Jadeite, however, is a tad different. Before you move, you may add 1 power to each location adjacent to King Jadeite that has no heroes. Jadeite also ends up adding 2 power to your territory, as Nephrite does, but with 1 power at 2 different locations. This is assuming, of course, that Jadeite has 2 locations adjacent to him, so be sure to place him in one of the 2 middle locations to get the full benefit of his ability. Also notice that a hero being at Jadeite's location does not stop him from placing power. The hero must be at the location where the power is going. For Nephrite, that's Nephrite's location, but for Jadeite, it's the locations adjacent to him. Next we have King Zoisite, whose ability is that before Beryl moves, you may add 1 power to a location that has a non-king ally and no heroes. That makes Zoisite's ability a lot more versatile than Nephrite or Jadeite, as it can change its target on the fly based on where you have non-king allies at. This also makes it a lot harder for opponents to block the power placement with heroes. The 4th and final king we have is King Kunzite, who's a bit different from the other 3. He doesn't actually help Beryl with placing power. Before you move, you may pay 1 power to choose a hero at King Kunzite's location. That hero then loses 1 strength. Rather than trying to get you power, Kunzite costs power, but he makes it easier to deal with pesky heroes that are interrupting your other kings, so it's usually worthwhile. There are 2 more things I want us to look at in relation to the 4 kings. First is Queen Beryl's ability. Before Queen Beryl moves, you may choose a king or form from your deck and put them into your hand, then shuffling your deck. Your only form is Super Beryl, so this ability is mainly to help you get that or the kings. This is very important because you start with just 1 power at each of your locations. You need to get the kings out quickly so you can start generating more power. I recommend picking up Nephrite or Jadeite first, since they've got the most straightforward and consistent power addition. Also, make sure to pay attention to the ability only being able to take the kings and form from the deck. You cannot use it to get them back from the discard pile, so be careful about when to use your kings and vanquishes. The second thing I want us to look at now is Beryl's only other item, Dark Crystal. Dark Crystal adds a play a card action to a location, but only if there is a king at that location as well. An extra play a card can be a huge help for Beryl, especially if you look closely at her leftmost location and see that it's lacking a play a card action in the first place. With the kings and the crystals done, let's get into Beryl's many other allies. You don't want to have to use your kings and vanquishes since you need their abilities to add power to locations and weaken heroes, so the other allies will be your go-to for vanquishes. You also want them to help make the silver crystal cheaper. First, we'll look at Queen Beryl's most powerful ally, the DD Girls. The DD Girls are expensive to play, and for good reason. They have 5 strength, which is enough to defeat any hero in Beryl's Fate deck, provided they haven't gotten any kind of strength buff. Even better than that, though, is their ability. Whenever the DD Girls would be discarded from your territory, you may pay 2 power to move them to any location instead. Then they lose 1 strength. This can be hard to make use of early in the game, where you need to stockpile 30 power to play Super Beryl, but if you're in a rough spot and need to take down some heroes, it can really help get you out of a pinch. Even better, it can go far in finishing Showdown when you no longer have to pay for the DD Girl's ability thanks to Super Beryl. Moving on from the DD Girls, we have 7 more allies with on-play abilities, starting with Gamesin and Bakeen. When Gamesin is played, you may choose a card from your discard pile and put it into your hand. It's always helpful to get a card you want back, and this is especially good if you drew the Silver Crystal very early. So long as you know Gamesin is coming up, you can discard Silver Crystal until you're ready to play it, then use him to get it back. Speaking of getting cards when you want them, Bakeen's ability is a little similar. When played, Bakeen lets you choose an effect from your deck or discard pile and put it into your hand, then shuffling your deck. He's more limited in card choice with only effects, which we'll look at soon, but in exchange he lets you grab a card from your deck or discard pile, rather than just the discard like Gamesin. Next up we have Boxy and Gigi, the Strength Token boys. When Boxy is played to a location that has no power, he gains 1 strength. Getting that extra strength can make the difference on Boxy being able to defeat some heroes solo, so it can be a major help. While Boxy gains strength, Gigi takes a different strength token approach. When played, you may remove a -1 strength token from an ally. This is very helpful when you recall how the DD Girls work, as it can let you get more use out of them. There are other ways the Fate deck can have allies lose strength as well. Our last 3 allies are Riku Kadar, Bunbu, and Vina. One of those is a bit harder to say than the others, and it's Riku Kadar, who when played lets you draw 2 cards. Good way to speed through your deck a bit quicker. After that ally with a name, we have Bunbu. When played, you may look at the top 6 cards of your deck, discard any number of them, and return the rest to the top in any order. Another great way to dig through your deck for important cards, which Beryl greatly appreciates. The final ally is Vina, and when you play her, you may move an ally to any location. Good for positioning allies for a vanquish, as well as putting your kings in better positions for adding power to locations if the Fate deck messed with them at some point. With the allies finished, next we'll look at Queen Beryl's effects. There are 6 of them total, and the first 3 help Beryl with adding power to locations. First is Fine Human Energy, which lets you add 2 power to a location other than Queen Beryl's. This is essentially a delayed gain 2 power, which Beryl likes a lot. Our next effect is Useless Failure, which has you discard an ally from your territory to add 3 power to their previous location. This gives a little extra power compared to Fine Human Energy, and it also doesn't have a location restriction, so you could use it to gain 3 power immediately. When you're close to that 30 power necessary, giving up some allies to bridge that final gap can be the best way to go. Lay the Bait is our final power adding card. When played, for each hero in your territory, you add 1 power to their location. If you end up getting swamped with heroes, this can be a good way to make the best out of a bad situation, and even if you've just got 1 hero out and about, it's still more power, which Beryl always appreciates. Moving on from effects that add power to locations, next we have 3 effects that mostly help Queen Beryl deal with heroes. First is Ultimate Attack, perhaps one of the most anime names we've had for a card. This card lets Beryl clash with a hero at any location, and Queen Beryl gets +2 strength during the clash. This can let Beryl clash with some of the weaker heroes in the early game, but even better is during Showdown when you just want to clear your territory to finish the game. After that we have Dome of Darkness, which lets you choose a location. Each hero at the chosen location then loses 1 strength. It can really help to bring heroes down just a little bit on their strength so that Beryl can more easily clash with them, or so an ally is capable of defeating them. Either way, it can be a big help, and if heroes end up stacked at a location, it just becomes that much better. The last effect is Go Now, which either lets you move an ally to any location, or choose a king from your discard pile and play them for free. Odds are you'll mostly use this card to get back a king that you ended up needing to use in a vanquish action, since Beryl's ability can't get them out of the discard, only her deck. Although there could be times where even at 2 cost, getting to move the DD girls or an already present king across your territory could make a major difference. Even more so when it becomes free to play in Showdown, thanks to Super Beryl. The final card in Queen Beryl's deck is one of my favorite schemes, and Beryl's only one, Ominous Sunspots. Ominous Sunspots triggers when the targeted player enters Showdown. Once triggered, Queen Beryl gains 5 power. She doesn't add it to a location, she just gets the 5 power. This is sort of an insurance policy for Queen Beryl. Her objective takes some time, so if an opponent gets well ahead of her and enters Showdown, Ominous Sunspots can give Beryl that little boost she needs to get to Showdown herself, and make it a very close game. With that, we finished the Villain deck, and so now we look at the Fate deck. Beryl's Fate deck is a unique one, because all of the heroes, except for 1, have a Fate effect that matches them. Most of those Fate effects even do better when their matching hero is in Beryl's territory. Because of that, we're going to look at each hero one at a time, alongside the Fate effect that matches them. The first hero is Sailor Mercury, and her matching effect is Bubble Spray. Mercury's ability is that each time a hero, including Sailor Mercury herself, is played or moved, you remove 1 power from their new location. This can be very damaging to Beryl, as her entire end goal is stockpile enough power to play Silver Crystal and Super Beryl. Defeating Mercury is basically a priority whenever she shows up, as she makes every subsequent hero even more damaging. Mercury's effect, Bubble Spray, lets the one playing it move a hero to any location, and then move a hero to any location again, even if it's the same hero. Of course, this can put heroes into more annoying positions, either where kings are or away from potential vanquishes. Even worse is when Mercury is in play though, as it lets you move heroes around to remove power from different locations thanks to her ability. Hero number 2 is Sailor Jupiter, and her matching effect is Supreme Thunder. While Sailor Jupiter is in play, when Queen Beryl draws cards at the end of each turn, she draws 1 less card. Naturally, this gives Beryl less options to work with, and makes it take longer to dig through her deck for the cards she wants. Drawing up to just 3 cards instead of 4 always hurts, unless you're playing as Tetsuo. Jupiter's effect also has to do with Beryl's hand. When Supreme Thunder is played, Queen Beryl must reveal her hand, and then the one playing Supreme Thunder gets to choose a card with a cost of 4 or less to discard. The only cards that don't fit the 4 or less criteria are Silver Crystal and Super Beryl, so any other card can be targeted. This can cause Beryl some major issues in her game plan, and if Jupiter is in play making her hand size effectively 3, with 1 then getting discarded by Supreme Thunder, having a turn with just 2 cards available can be hard to make work. Next on our list of heroes is Sailor Venus, with her effect, Crescent Beam. As long as Sailor Venus is in play, when another hero in Queen Beryl's territory would lose strength, Venus loses that strength instead. This stops Queen Beryl from weakening any other heroes, so she'll have to deal with Venus first if she wants to whittle down the rest of her opposition. Crescent Beam, Venus's effect, of course has to do with strength tokens as well. The one playing it gets to choose a hero. They remove all -1 strength tokens from that hero, and that hero then gains 1 strength. This works great on Venus herself if she's been tanking a bunch of strength loss already, but can also cause Beryl a headache if it just gets a hero 1 strength higher. Sailor Mars and her effect Fire Soul are the next pair. Sailor Mars has an ability similar to Mercury, which is that each time an ally in Queen Beryl's territory is moved, they lose 1 strength. This makes it rough to get allies in position to defeat Sailor Mars, and with her being at 4 strength, it won't be easy to take her down. Naturally, Fire Soul combos with Mars's ability, as it moves up to 2 allies to any locations. Beryl doesn't like it when her kings are put into less than optimal locations, and it hurts even more when Mars is in play and any allies moved also end up losing strength thanks to her ability. There's only one Sailor left, and that's the titular Sailor Moon with her matching effect, Healing Escalation. Sailor Moon's ability is one that only works once Beryl is in Showdown, where she gives all other heroes in Queen Beryl's territory +1 strength. If you'll remember, the silver crystal that you have to play for Super Beryl will have an opponent play Sailor Moon once you enter Showdown, so you'll have to deal with her and her ability in any game that you want to win as Beryl. But don't underestimate Sailor Moon if she gets played before you reach Showdown. While she doesn't have an ability until Super Beryl is played, she's still a 5-strength hero, which means it's going to take either multiple allies or a full-strength DD girls to defeat her. Also recall that the Silver Crystal gives Sailor Moon +3 strength once you're in Showdown, meaning she'll have an incredible 8 strength you'll need to surmount to defeat her. Now we have Sailor Moon's matching effect, Healing Escalation. When Healing Escalation is played, the one playing it gets to choose an ally with a cost of 1. That ally becomes a hero at the top of Queen Beryl's territory. This can't target the DD girls or any of the kings, as they cost 3 or 2, but it can target the other 7 allies Beryl has. Before Showdown, this effect doesn't really combo with Sailor Moon like the previous Sailor's own effects. However, if Beryl is in Showdown, then it combos quite well, because Sailor Moon's ability will give the ally-turned-hero an extra strength, just like she does for all the other heroes. That's all 5 of the Sailors, but we have one more pair of hero and effect, Tuxedo Mask and Miracle Romance. When Tuxedo Mask is played, each Sailor gains 1 strength. This makes it harder for Beryl to defeat any of the Sailors in her territory, and since their abilities hurt the longer they're around, this can be a major problem for Beryl. Especially if Tuxedo Mask shows up in Showdown and buffs an already 8-strength Sailor Moon up to 9 strength. Tuxedo Mask's matching effect is Miracle Romance, which is actually the only effect with 2 copies. Unlike the Sailor's effects, however, Miracle Romance doesn't really combo with Tuxedo Mask himself. When it's played, Queen Beryl loses 5 power. The one playing Miracle Romance then has to add 1 power for each power that was lost to any location in Queen Beryl's territory. The power can all be put onto one location or spread out among any number of locations, meaning Beryl will have to gather it up again to make use of it in playing her cards. That's all the effects, but we still have one last hero to look at, and this one is a 2-for-1 deal. Our last hero is Luna and Artemis, the beloved kitties. While Luna and Artemis don't have a matching effect, that's because they're a jack of all trades, and their ability works with any of the other effects. When Luna and Artemis are played, the one playing them gets to choose an effect from Queen Beryl's Fate deck or Fate discard pile and play it, then shuffling her Fate deck. This means that Luna and Artemis will let your opponent find and use whichever Fate effect would be most damaging in that moment, even more so if a matching Sailor is on the field. It also means that even if an effect is already in the discard pile, if Luna and Artemis are still in the Fate deck, Beryl could get hit with it at any time. And so we reach the final card in Queen Beryl's Fate deck, her challenge in the Name of the Moon. While In the Name of the Moon is in play, after an opponent plays an effect to Queen Beryl's territory, they may play it a second time, then discard it. This essentially means that any Fate effects in Beryl's deck will have their ability used twice rather than just once, which can be absolutely devastating for Beryl. To get rid of In the Name of the Moon, Queen Beryl will have to remove 1 power from each of her 4 locations. Thankfully, she can do this at any time, so she can get rid of the challenge quickly, but losing 4 power overall will be an annoying roadblock for her to overcome in gaining all the power she'll need. That does it for how to play as Queen Beryl. A manipulator from the shadows, when playing as Beryl, you'll have to take command of her Dark Kingdom army to combat the Sailors and harvest the power necessary to revive Queen Metalia. If you have any questions about Queen Beryl, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll do my best to answer. Also, look at the description for the playlist to see all the other Anime Villainous how-to videos so you can learn about any other characters that interest you. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you again for more Anime Villainous videos in the future. Until then, farewell.